Okay. I guess I'll start the recording by saying if you're here in person, we're having ice cream. So that's the treat this week. You should come in person. And we're kicking off this week with Leviticus. We were just chatting about specifically where we see blasphemer be punished according to the law that was just given. And it was interesting to see God fulfill the law as it was written and then repeat it. I was saying I normally don't like it when we read repeats of the same thing over and over again, but here it felt apt, like it felt like it really belonged. Like, hey, I need you to know, in case you've already forgotten, here is my law, here is what I said. And so it felt poignant and I liked it. Why don't you hand me my Bible and I'll see if I have any other cool, exciting things from Leviticus.
Nope. Skimming through, trying to see if I highlighted anything. I don't think I did.
I like Leviticus 25:42. It said, because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt. Did you get that out of the blender?
Yes.
Let me know if you taste the difference between the first one and this one.
Okay.
There is a small difference. He called the Israelites his servants, which is cool, right? Better?
It's more chocolatey. It's also watery.
There's more milk and more chocolate in
Yeah,
this one.
I would do less milk, more chocolate.
No, I thought it was cool, right? Because we see God calling them his people, but here he's setting them up, not just the priests to do his work, but the entire people. Like, part of being the Israelites, part of being God's people is serving his purposes, right? It's not just about fulfilling the blessing. And so it's cool to see that precedent set up this early. I don't think I noticed that before. I mean, Jesus talked about it all the time, but to see it set up in Leviticus is really cool. We can talk about Exodus 27:29. I didn't really understand this one. No person devoted to destruction may be ransomed. They're to be put to death. So the whole
Leviticus.
I must have said Exodus, but Leviticus
Okay.
27:29.
Exodus last
So
week.
all of 27 is about redeeming what belongs to God and ways to redeem people and land. But here it says, no person devoted to destruction may be ransomed. They are to be put to death. So when it says devoted to destruction, does that mean that they have set themselves to destruction? They have devoted themselves to destruction and so they can't be ransomed? Or they have been devoted by someone else, by God, according to the law, to be destroyed? Which
The latter.
Okay.
So that term devoted to destruction is used when they go into the land of Joshua and they attack Jericho. Everything's supposed to be destroyed, all the men, women, children, animals, and the only thing they're supposed to take is precious metals, and those are supposed to go to God.
Right.
And so that Achan takes some stuff for himself and causes all the trouble.
Cool. Glad I got an answer to that, and that we're going to see it play out in just two more books. It's really interesting, actually. So I'm going to cheat and skip ahead to Psalms. We'll go back, I promise. But
What is the last chapter of Leviticus?
Well, we read Numbers too.
Oh, okay.
So
where was your question about blood? You had in your video.
Second, I think this is pertinent because it's cool to me, right, that we're reading about this and then it goes into Joshua, right? It's cool to see as I don't remember who it was that asked last week, but they asked, it was Michael. He was asking, I think it was Michael. What was the purpose of this book, right? Like in today, why do we still care about Leviticus? And it's because
that was me. But
it was you?
Yeah.
Okay. It sets us up for the building blocks of seeing the mirror of, well, not just Jesus, but the things to come, and then the heavenly things in the future. And then so we see in Psalms, in Psalm 81, 11. But my people would not listen to me. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own devices. So we see again, God doing a thing, doing a great work, moving them out of Egypt, giving them the law, and then calling that they're not going to listen, right? And it's just, as we read this law, it's really, it's like the foreshadowing at the beginning of the movie, right? It's, here's the mini story about the big story we're actually going to tell you, right? The law sets up this cool outline for here's all the things that you're not supposed to do and all of the things you're going to do before I show you how to do them all right.
Well, I mean, Dad pointed out last week that the law is also there to show us our iniquities, that we could not physically fulfill these ourselves. We needed God to help us do that.
Unfortunately, the Hebrews, particularly the Pharisees, are trying to achieve righteousness by keeping the law, which is pretty much impossible, except for Jesus.
Right. Well,
and we continually fall into it in our churches.
Yeah.
We keep thinking that, if we put enough right rules in place, then we won't have to be listening and seeking God on it, because that's hard. It's easy to follow rules.
Yeah.
And there's always part of us that wants to earn what we get. I think Oswald Chambers uses the term that it's humiliating to have to accept salvation on God's terms.
Ooh.
But those are the terms.
I never
Yeah.
thought about it that way.
Say that one more time.
It's humiliating to accept salvation on God's terms. Although I think it's more humbling than necessarily humiliating, in my opinion.
And that was just a word choice, but it basically shows you are inadequate in and of yourself.
Right.
And for most people, their pride, bristles at that. It makes us rise up and say, resist it.
So in Numbers, we counted all the Israelites. There were lots of them. I thought it was interesting that the tribe of Judah was the biggest.
Isn't it supposed to be?
Why?
I thought there was a whole prophecy when they were when their father was giving them blessings.
Well, he said they'd be the royal line. I don't remember him
okay.
saying. We can go look. It's Genesis 49.
Here, I'll check.
I
thought that was one of the blessings.
Maybe it was cool to me that the tribe of Judah was literally bigger than the tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim put together.
Yeah. All right. Did you pay attention to how they were laid out around the tabernacle?
I did. I have a picture of it.
Yeah. So if you
I
look at
I hate reading it. Like every time I read it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. But seeing a picture of it made it very, very useful.
So if you look at the relative size of the four groups that are surrounding the temple or the tabernacle, the number of people on the east is the most. The number of people on the west is the least, and the south and the north are about balanced. It's a cross.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I drew mine as a square rather than a cross. But yeah, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun are all on the east. Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh, the smallest ones, are on the west. Dan is pretty big on the north. Does Reuben mash it up? No, he doesn't. Reuben, Simeon, Gad. They're balanced, but the north is definitely bigger than the south by 10 to 20.
A little bit, but the east is definitely much larger than the west. And so you've got that. You've got the long leg of the cross on the east side, which is also the gate that God comes through the temple to go into the temple when Solomon builds it. And Ezekiel also makes a big deal out of the eastern gate, that once God comes through it, no man can come through it anymore. He can come through the side entrance of the gate. The prince can come through the side entrance of the gate, the gates opened, but no person's supposed to go in and out through that entrance because God used it.
Yeah. Moses was also on the east side. Moses and Aaron and all of his sons.
Yeah.
There is nothing that specifically says Judah will be bigger. It just is Judah will be greater.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something about royalty.
Ruling. Yeah,
Right.
I read it too. It was all talking about royalty, ruling, not greatness in size.
I inferred.
That's fine. I do the same thing all the time. That's why it's cool to check it off of each other.
Yeah.
We get a flashback to Nadab and Abihu, and it says they had no sons, and so I had to question how old they were, because they had no sons.
Did they have daughters?
It doesn't say, but it said they had no sons, and so my first thought was they were like 20 and didn't have a chance to have kids. But I don't know. I mean, because at this point, Aaron would have been pretty old.
He would have been, in his mid 80s, but you also have to remember that people often got married later. If you look at Isaac, he got married when he was 40, but Rachel didn't have children until he was 60.
Yeah.
She was barren for 20 years.
So then it's very possible that if Nadab and Abihu were his youngest sons, that they hadn't even been married yet.
Yeah. Or they could have been in their 30s or 40s. They may not be married, but they may have been married but not had children yet.
And my translation actually says had no children. Not just
Okay.
no sons.
Okay.
That
Mine
answers
says
my
actually
question.
no children. I don't know the Greek or the Hebrew to know for sure.
That's
In
fair.
Spanish, sons and children are the same word.
Yeah, so it's very possible that it.
It's just one of those things because there are a lot of places in the Bible where it says had no sons, and they do specifically mean male descendants
Yeah.
because they did have daughters.
Yep.
Well,
Then
because
again, there was nothing
They
in
did-
there that would make me believe that there was no information at all about age, marital status, or kids.
Okay.
It just there is some information about kids, but
Yeah,
that's
they
all.
can
And so I then just imagined them for half a second as me as a teenager running around trying to be a priest and doing it wrong and getting killed.
Gotcha.
Right? We don't know exactly what happened, just that they offered unauthorized fire. But I
Right.
wonder if it was young men doing it wrong,
Possibly.
or if it was, just a heart issue.
I think it was just an honest mistake, the same as Uzzah, made when he put his hand out to steady the ark on the cart. He overlooked God's holiness for a moment, and it cost him his life. It wasn't sin; it was just a mistake. And so I think Nadab and Abihu are kind of in that same category where they misunderstood what they should have been doing, and they did something in their own will rather than waiting for God to tell them what to do, and they paid a price for it.
Yeah.
It does. I get what you're saying about the younger age potentially, but I also think I'm just remembering when Aaron was like, "Oh yeah, I threw all this gold in the fire and a calf came out."
Yeah, he was old when he was.
He was 86 or something. like
83.
that?
He was 83 at that point.
83
Yeah.
at that point. So just because of their age doesn't necessarily
That's
mean they
true.
were more mature or less
if
mature.
they were related to Aaron, you can't know. And we do see
Yeah.
plenty of examples of mature young people.
Yes,
in the Bible.
absolutely.
Well, Samuel comes to mind as somebody incredibly mature for his age.
Joshua, Gideon.
Daniel.
My Bible in my notes today suggested that Samuel was a Nazirite. Does it say that in Samuel that he was a Nazirite, or were they just guessing because he was dedicated as a child?
I think his mother said, something about no razor will come on his head. So
Okay.
I believe he was a Nazirite.
All right,
Right.
cool. I'd never picked up on that before.
Yeah.
We see God count the Levites different than everybody else. They get counted from every male a month old or more. And obviously the spiritual side of me says, okay, well, that's because as soon as they're a month old, they've already inherited the priestly blessing,
Right.
and so they're part of it. And then the physical side of me says, oh, they needed to count more Levites because they needed to atone for the firstborns. And if they only counted the 20-year-olds, they would have had to make up for way more Israelites.
Well, the counting on the other side had to do with fitness for going to war.
Right, I was just about to ask about
And-
that.
and
Levites didn't go
the
to war,
Levites didn't
except the
fight.
ones who carried the ark, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the ones that blew the trumpets too, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I
That's-
mean, they went into war with the ark and with the trumpets, but they weren't warriors in the sense of carrying weapons or fighting battles per se. It's also cool to see how God fulfills the blessing that Jacob gives to, where he says, "I will divide Levi and Simeon in Israel," because he puts Simeon's territory. This is in Joshua. He puts Simeon's territory within Judah's territory, and then the Levites are spread out all over the place. They've got cities in every tribe. So he took care of mixing things up and separating them pretty well.
And I thought it was interesting with the Levites, and they did most of their, for where they talked about for their work between 30 and 40. I mean, 50.
30 and 50.
30 and 50.
Yeah.
Is when they
So
were to
that's,
do.
that's kind of your prime. So they get to be, family people when they're younger, get to raise their kids, and then they get into the more serious business when their kids are a little bit older. And that's very, healthy, I think, from a family point of view, the way
Yeah.
they did that.
Yeah.
Do we know what the average lifespan was at this point in time?
Average, no, but you see that, Moses lives to be 120.
They
Aaron
seem
lives to be
very-
about
I don't think that
122, 3.
was regular.
Joshua lives to be 110. So, and Caleb is like 85 when they're done conquering the land. And he says he's as strong as he was when they went to explore it when he was 45. So, or 40 something. So, people were still living into the early hundreds at least
Okay.
regularly. It wasn't like before the flood when people were living 800 or 900 years, but they still have longer lifespans. Now, by the time you get around to Jesus, 50 years old is old. The guy in the temple, Simeon, I think is, it doesn't say all his, Anna is like in her 80s. But the lifespans had dropped quite a bit by the time you get to the first century.
Well, we also know that most of the Israelites that were older than 20 died in the desert for 40 years.
Right. So
you can then assume that the average lifespan of the Israelites, at least while traveling with Moses, was 60 years.
that's fair.
Well, they got killed pretty much.
That's fine. I'm not saying the average lifespan of a human. I said the average lifespan of an Israelite while traveling with Moses was 60 years old. Caleb was the exception.
And Joshua.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
and Joshua, you're right.
because they did what they were told.
Yeah. Well, they had faith, which we'll read more about in Hebrews. All right, we read the Nazarite vow. Sarah, you were asking if we read about Samuel. We did not read about. Oh, sorry, Samson. We did not read about Samson.
Okay, but we learned about.
We just learned about the vow, and every time I read the vow, I'm like, Samson didn't do any of this.
No.
Like he
No.
had the long hair, but
He
that's it.
violated almost every part of it. He drank. He indulged in sexual immorality and everything else.
He murdered people, so he was right next to dead folk.
Well, he
Yes.
touched a dead animal carcass to eat honey from it. I mean,
Yeah.
He was very bad at keeping the promise. He did, in fact, cut his hair too. He broke everything.
he didn't cut his hair.
Fine.
A barber cut his hair.
Fine.
But
All right, that's Numbers. Yeah, that's Numbers. Let's do Psalms. We did Psalm 64.
Did we read all of Numbers?
No, we just read the first 8 7 chapters.
7 chapters.
Okay.
My bookmark
So-
stopped.
We'll get to it later. That's one of the coolest prophecies in the Bible is in Numbers. So but that's later in the 20s and 30 chapter.
Cool. We'll get there.
Yeah.
I thought this was cool. In Psalm 64:9, all people will fear. They will proclaim the works of God and ponder what He has done. Right? You always hear, right? Every knee will bow, every tongue confess. But this is cool. Everybody's gonna ponder God. They're gonna ponder Him. That's interesting. Everybody's gonna sit and be like, "Huh, that God character. He's a thinker."
I mean, that happens every day still to this day.
For us, not to the
But
people.
this says
This says
everybody.
everyone is going to. That's what got me. Is that not everyone's not just going to be afraid. Everyone's not just going to be submissive. Everyone's going to be curious.
I think God put that curiosity in us. He wants us to find Him and want to be with Him and a part of His creation.
I agree. Was it 114 that we read?
112.
112.
112. Okay. I didn't move my bookmark. So we see 112. I underlined, God will come to those who are generous and lend freely. I mean, that's encouraging to me because I feel that I am generous and lend freely. But I think that it's cool to see that God has that heart. I mean, we saw that a few weeks ago, right? God is compassionate. He lends very freely. But it's cool to see that He then looks favorably on us when we do that. Because I know that it's very tempting for us to fall into this mentality of I only want to help people that are going to help themselves, or only want to help my friends or the people I know, right? And God is calling us to
Help everyone.
and to be generous. Like
Yeah.
it's all His anyway, right? He talked about that in an earlier verse that all the land is His. So when we're generous, we're just being generous with His stuff.
The things like
That's an important point about our wealth and possessions. Some Christians tend to think once I've tithed, the rest of it's mine to do with what I want, but that's really not true at all. You're still a steward of something that was given to you because you came into the world with nothing. So you have just as much responsibility to use that part wisely as well.
Yep. The tithing is just the bare minimum.
Right. And with what you just said, it reminded me of the parable that Jesus talks about where He gave so much to the different servants and one of them just buried it. And it's the same kind of principle of stewardship.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
We lost our teacher.
I'm going to go let my dog back in, I think.
No, I hear children's feet running around upstairs right now.
Uh-oh.
So
That'll do it.
I
too.
just went to check on Henry, and Henry was snoring in bed, so not up. Maybe what we actually heard was Adelaide running around, and I didn't check her bed. That's believable. Henry has been feeling a little under the weather today, so he passed out real early.
Don't blame him.
Allergies?
I hope so. It's a lot of sneezing and clear discharge, glassy eyes. But we've been spending a lot of time outside and cleaning inside, which stirs up dust. And we know he has general allergies. So we'll see. He also missed his Zyrtec yesterday.
Oh, that probably didn't help.
Yeah, so that probably triggered some of it. So we'll see.
He got it tonight, though, right?
I hear him. That's him.
Yeah, I heard the cough.
To go back to jump back to I'm turning in my notes. Leviticus 24, verse 4, about the lamps, how they must be tended continually. And it struck me that the question we need to ask is, how do we tend our own light, our own lamps? And that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. So we need to be daily seeking him, trimming the wick, making sure we have oil, guarding it in storms, and not being casual about something just because it's always there. I mean, it would be very, very easy to get casual about that lamp.
Right.
Because it was always supposed to always be lit. And Jesus is always in our hearts, and we can't get casual. It needs to be guarded continually.
Good point. What's wrong, Sarah? You're making a face.
Henry's crying and not feeling very well. They're trying to take care of him.
Oh, okay.
He's coughing, so my guess is he woke himself up with nasal discharge, and
Okay.
they're trying to clear that for him. Yeah, what you were saying, Cindy, it makes me think of the parable of the wives who are waiting, or the women who are waiting for Jesus.
Yes.
And you had the ones who kept their lamps going because they had enough oil and all of that. And so the concept of being prepared and not taking God for granted. Yes, it's always lit, but you have to make sure that it's taken care of so that it can continue to always be lit.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I thought that was an excellent point.
My mom just had her knee surgery Monday.
Mhm.
And so I'm having to monitor pain and other issues from afar.
Yeah.
And so she's texting me issues, and I'm like, so don't mean to be rude, but have to put my nurse hat on for a second.
No worries. Does anybody else have anything from Leviticus or Psalms
Or Numbers?
or Numbers? Yes, I keep forgetting that we read Numbers because I didn't read Numbers this week.
That's all right. All right, let's jump into Hebrews.
Cool.
So I just loved this in 9:26. We just see he has appeared once for all at the culmination of the ages to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself. Just as people are destined to die once and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many. And he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. I love it. I don't think I can add anything to that.
Well, that pretty much speaks for itself.
I like what it says in verse 24 about a mere copy of the true one.
Mm.
It's cool that God lets us make copies, or enables us to mimic the things he's doing, to be more like him. Dad, you were asking earlier in verse 22 is where it talks about the blood. It says, in fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood.
Yeah.
And
So I know you have this icky feeling about blood, but if you go back to the law, God talks about not consuming the blood because the life is in the blood. And, you see that same thing carried forward in Jesus. Our life is in his blood when he covers us. So, while blood may seem kind of gory from the way we use it in movies and, see some things in life, but it's still a glorious thing in terms of what can be done with it.
yeah.
Well, and aren't we washed by his blood too? His
Yes.
blood is
Yeah,
what
but
makes
that's-
us white.
But that's metaphorical, right?
I don't know.
I mean,
I'm a very literally brain
I mean,
person,
it did
so-
happen literally. Like his blood was literally spilled,
Right.
but that didn't make the ground clean. Like we are made clean by the action of his blood spilling. Right? I don't need to actually go find Jesus's blood and take a bath in it
No.
in order to be made clean. I am clean by the action of that he
Of his sacrifice.
that he made by spilling his. Well, it's not just his sacrifice. I mean, it literally is his blood poured out was the atonement. And so I get that we are quote unquote cleansed with blood, but these people were literally sprinkling the blood on each other, and that's the part where it's like that doesn't seem sanitary or clean. 'Cause,
Well, I think God's going to take care of that. I mean, God.
Yeah.
And you know, Richard, you were raised at a time where we knew that you could get serious diseases from touching someone's blood.
Mm-hmm.
When I started nursing, I still worked with nurses that were older that didn't put gloves on to start IVs and things like that. They were used to just touching blood. That was part of what nurses did. So I think that is also impacting how you're thinking about when you read this.
Yeah.
You have a very modern mindset.
Well, yeah. I mean that's fair, but that doesn't change the fact that even back then there were blood transmitted diseases, right?
Not nearly as many.
I mean, AIDS didn't exist back then.
Hepatitis wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
But a lot of the big ones we have today started in the 80s, was it?
What were you guys doing in the 80s?
Partying, man.
It was the 60s that influenced the 80s, okay?
Y'all were still around in the 60s.
Blame it on the previous generation.
Technically your parents, but that's okay.
I was around in the
Their
50s.
products. My wife is in the other room defending you, so.
So just back to the blood thing for a second.
Yeah.
So you see in Revelation, Jesus trampling the winepress of God's wrath and staining his robes with the blood. And it talks about the blood being up to the horses' bridles and 200 miles away from where, I mean, it's a big deal.
It's a lot of blood. Maybe we are going to take a blood bath.
Yeah. Literally.
I think 2 years ago, someone recommended reading this book called Facing the Lions. And I ended up picking up two because I didn't get the author's name. They were both phenomenal. But one of them is about, I think, the Manasseh, the Maasai tribe in Africa, and how cattle are such a big deal. And they make meals from the blood and the milk. And I think part of it, like what I said, it's cultural. Like to them, blood is life.
Yeah.
To be able to bleed their cows and get their blood is life bringing and giving to them.
Yeah. Native Americans and I think some tribes in Africa also drink the blood of particular animals because they think it endows them with properties from those animals as well. I don't believe that's the case, but that is their religious beliefs that, drinking a horse's blood will give them speed and strength and things like that, or drinking a lion's blood will give them courage. So there is, culture around blood probably in just about every ethnic group in the world.
I mean, we're told here how important it is. I'm not questioning that. It's just, and Cindy, I think your point helped me the most. Like thinking about back then, seeing blood as a cleansing product would not have been an issue for them, whereas now I see it as something dirty. And that said, right? I mean, if we make it to heaven and there's a tabernacle and Christ's blood is literally in a vat and they're like, you want to get baptized in it? I'd be like, yes, please. Like I'm not going to carry with me, hopefully, any of the weight of blood being unclean.
Yeah, the
But
prejudice.
yeah, exactly. But it just today, right, when I think about like spraying blood on things to make it clean, I would say, no, that makes it holy. It sets it apart because now I got to clean it. But but it is not clean. We see in Hebrews 10:24, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So that's why we made chocolate tonight, was to encourage and spur each other on to meet together.
Is this the one that has the iron sharpening iron
No.
or steel or okay?
I don't think so. I didn't read that this week. Dad, do you know what verse that is? As iron sharpens iron.
It's in Proverbs.
Proverbs. Okay.
Let me look. I think it's
Reminded me.
It's similar,
Of
right? I
that,
mean,
yeah.
and that's why it's important for us to meet together, right? Is so that we can share our prejudices and our thoughts. And like, well, hold on, this doesn't make sense to me, and we can, as a group, try and work it out. We were built for community, and so we work better as a community. Both good and bad, right? I mean, you see Babel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like this, encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. And it's funny that, back then, that was 2,000 years ago, they still saw the day approaching. And I think we've had so much time that now we forget the day is approaching. But in fact, the day is 2,000 years closer.
Right.
It is more close. We should have more urgency than they did, not less.
I just
it's
wanted-
Proverbs 27:17.
Thank
What
you.
was it? Proverbs what?
27:17.
27:17.
People like guessing. And if they keep guessing, eventually they'll get it
No, they won't.
right.
That's my point. Is Jesus said no one will know the day, and so if you keep guessing,
Well, the guess is
that
annoying.
day is now no longer allowed to be the day.
I don't think that's not how that works.
So
Otherwise,
people are trying to keep Jesus from coming back by guessing different days, right?
Exactly.
If I guess it, he can't come, right? Do anybody see the movie What About Bob, where he like pretends to have a disease because if he's faking it, he can't get it?
Yeah.
Oh,
You might have to believe that it's actually the day for it to not count.
I don't know.
I don't think there's any kind of, like, it doesn't say that no one is going to guess the day properly. It says no one will know. Anyone that makes a guess is guessing. They don't know that he's coming. You cannot know. No matter what clues you found that you think point to it, they did not. Something else pointed to it, and that something else is Jesus decided.
Yes. Well, Jesus didn't even know on earth.
So that's true.
He knows now, I think.
Well, considering now is then and
Right.
time.
Is weird there. Yeah. Or non-existent.
We see my probably one of my favorite verses in all of Scripture, Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. I love that because it reminds me when my faith isn't strong, that my faith is more than just believing in something. It's hoping for something and having confidence in that hope because I am hoping in someone who keeps his promises, not hoping in an empty promise, not hoping in myself. I am hoping in someone that I can have confidence in hoping for and being sure that even though I don't see it now, that I'm going to see it come to fruition. It doesn't mean I always used to think that it said the things that are unseen, but it's not, right? It's not that we don't. It's not that it can't be seen. It's that we're not seeing it now, and so we can be sure. Faith isn't, oh, I can't possibly know, so I'm guessing, right? It's not like the day Jesus is coming. It's not a guess.
Right.
It is assurance. You are sure about it. You know. You just can't see it. But you can be sure. You can be positive that it's there. You can be positive that it's coming. And so it's as good as, if not better than seeing.
You practice faith when you sit down in a chair because you have faith that it's going to support your weight and not collapse under you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that faith may be disappointed if you sit in the wrong chair, but that's a good picture of trust is I'm leaning all of my weight on this thing because I believe it's going to hold me up. And that's, the same way that we rely on Jesus, that, we put all of our hope, all of our trust, all of our life into him, because we know it's protected there and we know that he will support us.
But a lot of people see that verse and they think, oh, well, to use your metaphor, that it's the same as sitting in an invisible chair that you can't see, but you have to hope it's there. That's not the case. It's the same as sitting in a real chair. We know that it's there. The thing that's unseen is the forces, the strong nuclear forces holding the chair together, right?
Yes.
We know that it's there. We know that it's going to support us, even though we can't see all of it working, right? It's not that it's invisible. It's not that we're guessing and hoping. We know, just as sure as we know the chair is there. And so we can be sure and we can sit in it. So that's one of my favorite verses, and it gets better every time I read it.
I love that whole chapter. It's just amazing.
Yeah, to continue in the chapter, we see 11:11. By faith, Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was unable to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. So again, it's not that she believed she could have a kid. It's she believed that God does what he says he's going to do.
Right.
And he did. Although she laughed. Like, I don't remember the part where it says, and then she believed. I guess we're assuming that came.
Abraham laughed too.
I know. I mean, they named him Isaac for a reason.
My guess was after she got called out for laughing, she was like, oh, he's serious.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I believe.
I mean, to be fair, it is kind of a funny thought.
Yeah, just thinking about that whole thing about Abraham having faith for a child. There's less faith there on Abraham's part in terms of, even after he had Isaac, he had a bunch more kids with his next wife. So it's like, old guys can still have kids. It's older women have the difficulty because the plumbing doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. I mean, and Sarah had been reminded her whole life that her plumbing didn't work. Right. It wasn't just that she was old. It was, this never worked. Why would it work now?
Yeah, that's something I think our culture doesn't appreciate, is the devastation that came with barrenness in those days, because every woman had at least the hope that she might be the mother of the Messiah, or at least in his line. And you see that with how devastated Hannah was when she was barren before she had Samuel. I mean, and you even see it in Hagar's reaction when she gets pregnant. She's mocking and despising Sarah because I'm pregnant and you can't get pregnant.
Yeah. And people still struggle with that today, but we definitely have more help around it than
Well, we have
praying to fertility gods.
We have more science to let us know, okay, here's why you're barren or why you're having issues. And so that tends to give some people at least a little bit of comfort.
Yeah.
But I've seen people who did all the tests, they're not going to have kids, and then they had 3 children. So God can still do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you mention about Hebrews that to be, like this great cloud of witnesses that you see in 12, that some of them saw God's answer to the promises while they were here. Others did not.
Yeah.
And we need to walk in faith knowing that we could be on either side.
Yeah, that's really hard for a lot of people because, especially today when we have such a personal relationship with Christ, it becomes very easy for us to think about salvation as all about us and God's kingdom is all about us. So obviously, if God's not going to fulfill his promise to me in my lifetime, well, what good is it? It can't possibly help the next generation. It can't possibly further his kingdom for the world, right? And so it definitely is very easy to get me focused, to look at even a decade of suffering and things going on is like, oh well, clearly God isn't in this. I mean, he was doing things for
Right.
hundreds of years and very well past people's lives. And so whenever I'm struggling with something, I often try and like take a step back and say like, how does this problem look if I'm not here, right? If I died tomorrow and didn't exist, would this still really be a problem? And how would God work it out with everybody else? And it helps most of the time to be able to say, you know, like that a lot of the things that we hold up as important are fleeting, and God's promises are not. And so try not to put God into the same position as you would your friend that said they were going to pay you $5 back, you know, a week ago, right? It's not the same thing. It's very different.
Yeah. His timing is very, very different.
But the things are the things that he's promising are comparably different, right? Not
Yes.
only is his timing different, his promises are not just about us. They're fulfilling his work, his kingdom, and they go well beyond us. We are blessed to be even mentioned in the story.
Right.
Since we made it to 12, I love that we see, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. I just loved this. The pioneer and perfecter of faith. He did it first and he did it best. Which he did. I mean, right? He showed us what real faith in God looked like, right? He believed he was who he said he was, and that God was going to do great work in him. And then he perfected it by dying and being the ultimate sacrifice.
I really love verses 12 and 13 of 12 because what they say to me is you need to take appropriate action also.
Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level
Right.
paths for your feet so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Can you hand me my pen? I don't have that underlined and I want it underlined. That's really difficult. This is just reminding me to do my stretches every day for our run. Gonna put this verse up in my gym. Strengthen your feeble arms and your weak knees. No, I think this is good, right? I mean, we do have a part to play in it. But notice that the output of that, right?
We have to strike that balance because we have people in the faith that one believe it all depends on them, and others who think it all depends on God, and they can just be passive about it. And neither of those is the right view of our relationship. You know, we need to be taking an active part as a participant, you know, because we're in that relationship with him.
But look at the output of it, right? It's not just
for us.
Yeah, it's not strengthen your arms and weak knees so you can run better. It's do it so that the lame and will not be disabled and healed.
Yeah.
Right? Like our effort, our work, our suffering, our faith isn't just for us. It literally heals the people around us, heals the world around us. Again, it's that perspective, right? And it's especially in our culture hard to not think about me and to think about us. What do you guys think about 12:29? Our God is a consuming fire. I noted that this almost felt like a name of God, right? I told you I'm going to highlight anytime I read a name of God throughout the year. This isn't really a name so much as a property.
Yeah.
But it felt like a name. Like
Yeah,
in Spanish, it would be a name.
Right.
God, the consuming fire.
Yeah. So there's two places in Scripture where God is described this way. One is here where it says God is a consuming fire, and then in I think it's 1 John, he says God is love. And you know, those are just those are attributes. They're not titles necessarily, but they speak to his essence.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I think it helps to, you know, when I read that God is a jealous God, I always struggle with that one, right? And I've not anymore. I've gotten to a place where I just define it the right way. But when you think about a fire, it wants to consume everything. It spreads to everything it can get.
Right.
And assuming it can be burned up, that fire is going to get it. And you could say deserves it, right? And so that jealousy, when it's meant for the fire, it makes sense. Maybe that doesn't jive with everybody, but for me, putting those two together, seeing someone as jealous and as a consuming fire, it strengthens both images rather than being separated.
Okay, I'm seeing it differently. I'm seeing it more how Dad was describing it, as the all-consuming fire being his love. His love is consuming everyone.
Dad was just pointing out that those are the two places where God is described as an object rather than as a name.
Yes,
But
they're sorry. I'm thinking of it mostly because there are songs I've heard that are about all-consuming fire and depicting it from the aspect of love instead of.
Yes.
I would argue that jealousy and love are also very much the same.
Okay, my brain doesn't agree with that, but that probably just means I don't understand it properly yet.
Yeah, so
We
there's
have different understandings. That's fine. But for me, jealousy is often born out of love, right? When you love someone and then that love is not reciprocated the way you think it should be, that's when feelings of jealousy arise. And so that jealousy is wanting love returned.
Yeah. So when God has an emotion, it's in a holy way, and when we have that same emotion, sometimes we aren't quite so holy because we're being selfish about it. So
Right.
God can be angry in a righteous way. We can too, but we can also be angry in an unrighteous way, and we can be jealous in an unrighteous way. We talked in your video. You talked about the procedure for when a man is jealous about his wife and thinks she might have been unfaithful to him.
Yeah.
So that law and that process was to protect both the man and his wife. I mean, if she has done nothing wrong, nothing happens to her, and then he knows that she's pure. But you see those kinds of things, and you have to remember that when God is described in human terms, it's not quite the same way that we experience those emotions.
And then in 13:8, it says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. This is not the only verse that says God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? There's a different verse that says that, right? Or is this
There are verses that point out that he doesn't change.
But does one point out that God doesn't change and one point out that
It's-
Jesus doesn't change?
It's also in John 8:58.
Can you read that one?
I have to find it, but
Sure.
yes. At least
I thought-
JN is John, right?
Yeah.
It's abbreviated.
Yeah. I always thought that the verse was God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And here it's saying Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And as soon as I read that, I was like, well, Jesus was human, right? He wasn't the same every day. Maybe now, but
Well, in his essence of, in the core of who he is, he does not change, right? His personality doesn't change. His physical form can change. God's physical form can change, right?
I assume that as a human, his personality changed as he went through puberty. I'm sure he was still sure of who he was and his calling, but I have to imagine that as a human, part of being a human is change, right? I can't believe that he spent all 30 years being the exact same person. I can believe that in his deity, that his purpose was the same at creation, at manifestation, and at his second coming. That he was the same in all of those in spirit. But when I just think of Jesus, like if I think of him as the same and not as a dynamic person, it makes it harder for me to relate to him, not easier.
I don't think I would let that diminish him. I would think, that verse speaks to his constancy, to his reliability, to his faithfulness. But he doesn't change his mind. He doesn't change his character. He doesn't change who and what he is. His physical form could change,
Yeah.
And since Jesus was fully man and fully God, yes, the man part definitely has to grow up from being a baby to a toddler to a child to an adolescent to an adult. That's just, but you went through all those stages, but it didn't change who you were as my son or the core of your personality.
I would disagree with that. I would agree that it doesn't change who I am as your son, right? It doesn't change who I am as a child of God, right? None of those things changed. But the core of my personality has changed greatly in just the past 2 years from COVID, right? And in the past 5 years as a dad, the past 8 years as a husband, the past 10 years as a college dad.
I would admit the core has not changed.
I would say it has. I think it very much has. I kept records of letters I wrote, things I did in high school and college, and I go back and I read them sometime, and I read the thoughts I had, the person I was, and I see a very different person in the way that I thought, in the way that I acted. I mean, there are similarities, right? I can find the similarities, just like if you look at pictures, I look kind of the same. But I think me as a person has changed very, very much, even in a short period of time, I would say. And there are lots of things that are the same, but I would argue that the core principles are actually a lot of the things that were still very malleable, and the things that have changed by current events, by interactions with people, interactions with God, have changed the very core of who I am. In a good way. I think it's a good thing. I like who I am, but I don't expect to be this same person I am now in a decade. I expect to be different again, hopefully for the better, but I expect to be a very different person.
All right, so let me come at it from a different direction then. Who you are is not who you decide you are. Who you are is who God created you to be. And that doesn't change.
Agreed.
You discover that. I mean, that's something that's revealed to you based on your level of, spiritual discernment and insight. So, God will tell you things about yourself, like you're an intercessor, or, you're a worshiper, those things don't change. They may be hidden at times from your understanding. So, part of what's gone so wrong in our culture is people wanting to decide who they are, or people letting other people tell them who they are. If somebody tells you you're a loser, well, that's not what God says about you. That's somebody's opinion. And if you accept that opinion, that affects you very negatively. So, in that spiritual level, I don't think you change. I don't think you become what God made you to be. You're already there. It's more a matter of revelation and realization, not of developing and growing into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so. Okay. I agree that, and that goes back to the same point as you were saying, right? When you say I'm your son, right, that never changes, right? That doesn't, no matter how I twist and turn and evolve, some things are just fact and stuck. We see in Malachi 3, verse 6, "For I, Yahweh, have not changed, and you, who children of Jacob, have not perished from the days of your ancestors. You have turned aside from my rules. You have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you." So we see here where God says, "I have not changed." And we see that from he hadn't changed from freeing them from Egypt all the way to Malachi, right before Christ.
It's also Hebrews 1 verse 12. It starts out talking about, "You will roll them up like a cloak, and they will be changed like a robe. But you are the same, and your years will never end."
Yeah, but the verse that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow is actually only Hebrews 13:8, and it is actually Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So I've been quoting that wrong my entire life, but that's why you keep reading and you keep learning, right? Because I think that changes it, and I get it. God and Jesus are the same, but they have there are different manifestations and different purposes, and so it is interesting to see Jesus being labeled as the one that doesn't change, because I wonder if that does mean God can change.
Well, God can change his mind.
Yeah, but then does maybe Jesus doesn't? Maybe Jesus doesn't change his mind.
No, because there are verses where it's like, no, I'm not going to heal your daughter, and it's like, but even the dogs get the crumbs off the table. It's like, you're right. Here you go.
I mean, you could argue that in that instance, it's similar
So,
to God's.
I think sometimes that's a matter of God inviting us to, just like when he says, when he tells Moses, I'm going to destroy them all to make a great people out of you. That's an invitation to Moses to intercede,
Yeah.
right? And you see the same thing with Abraham, where he's interceding for Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right.
And he goes so far, but he doesn't go as far as, if there's one righteous person, will you leave it alone? He doesn't go that last step, and you see the results.
So it's hard for us to know, but it's interesting to see, and I wonder what the author of Hebrews meant when he was saying Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. If he meant Jesus's plans and purposes are the same, or if he really means like he is a static point that you can fix on, that you can say this isn't going to change. All of the things that change in this life, we can look at that and say his promises don't change, his plans don't change, his purpose don't change, his thoughts don't change. If he says this, it's going to happen. Like what he really meant, like what his point was, because we can pontificate about, oh, well, if he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and he, wore this on Thursday, he's going to wear that on Friday, right?
No, it's talking about character in essence. It's not talking about because God also says in some places, I'm going to do a new thing. So he's doing something he hasn't done before.
Yeah.
And, throughout the Bible, he reveals, new names, which tell us different things about himself. Now, he's not really changing, but our understanding of him has changed because he's now, I am who I am, rather than just I'm the Lord God Almighty.
Which was the John 1.
Yeah.
I am.
No, that's really cool. And it's just, even if he doesn't change, clearly our understanding of him changes all the time. But it's interesting to think that maybe he does change. Maybe he's more dynamic than I believed before. Because I don't think that would go against the things I've read so far, and I don't think that would hurt anything for him to be more of a dynamic thing to interact with. But I don't know. We'll keep reading and keep looking into it. But it was just interesting reading it this week. Because in context, it's different than I've always heard it used.
Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything interesting they really wanted to talk about before I close this out? All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, I just thank you that we continue to get to come together to read your word, to hear what you're saying over us personally, but over us as a group as well. I thank you that you are continually revealing yourself to us more and more each week. And as you do, we get to grow. And even though you're not changing, you are changing us. You're changing how we get to see and interact with you. And it's wonderful in new ways. We just thank you for that excitement. Help us to take that passion, that joy, and to share it, Lord, to strengthen our legs and our knees, to run the path that you set before us, and to heal those around us, to interact with those around us, to bring salvation to those around us so that they can experience you and your joy in the same way. We just thank you for the law that you gave us and for the ultimate sacrifice that you made to fulfill the law. We just consider that this week. I want to share that as well with those we come in contact with. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for joining, for the good conversation this week. We kept it pretty close to time. We're getting better at this. We're getting there.
Well, you started 6 minutes late too.
Nice. So we're only 5 minutes over.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
No, you're still 11 minutes over, but you need to get started on time.
there you go. Well, we got to do both things. But thank you for joining. And I don't know what we're having next week, but it'll be good. So if you're watching this, come in person. All right. I'll see you all later.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.